Hello, everyone, and welcome to Now Spinning, the official podcast of the Lansing Community College Vinyl Record Club. We meet twice a month to listen to vinyl and talk about music. Stay tuned to learn about how you can get in touch with us and attend our meetings. My name is Simon Medina, and with me today I have
Leo Ackerman
and Jacob Zokvic.
Welcome, everybody, and today we have a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. It is one of my favorite bands of all time, and that is the Talking Heads. We love the Talking Heads. We're gonna do a little bit of a deep dive into their discography today, and basically try and introduce you to why you should listen to them. It's very good.
We'll be giving a rundown.
Yes.
We'll be giving a rundown to Jacob right now.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
So before we get into the deep dive itself, I wanted to go around the room and say ask everybody, like, how much background information do we have about this band? Like, where did we first learn about them? Like, what songs and all that.
I think I'm not entirely sure where I first learned about Talking Heads. It was just a name that I'd always heard floating around when it comes to like alternative music or like bands that everyone says is super influential. I knew about them, didn't know much about them. Finally listened to Remain in Light, I think in sophomore year of high school, and I've loved them ever since. Just big on their sound. Everyone saying that they're influential is right. I've been a fan for a few years. I'll leave it at that.
Very nice.
All right. I can describe my exact experience
Good.
of discovering Talking Heads. And it is going to date me so bad. So when I was a kid, and I mean, this still exists, but when I was a kid, as a child of the 90s, my father had a large CD collection. Every kid in the 90s, their father had a CD collection. Like, it was just what was going on. And I remember being a kid, relatively young, going through it, looking for stuff, going like, okay, here's the Hercules soundtrack. Oh, if I go up a couple things, it's my dad's like actual rock and roll collection. And I remember seeing Talking Heads in there and pulling it out and being like, this looks weird as like, and again, I'm a child.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the CD for Stop Making Sense. Dude in a big suit on it. And I'm like, this looks really weird. What's going on there? And then this is going to date me even more and is fairly embarrassing. But a few years later, VH1 had a show, or had a whole series of shows, just garbage countdown television. Like I Love the 80s was one show, or like Top 100 Songs from the 80s was another show. Bunch of just like, I mean, no fault if you like this kind of stuff, but that is some of the lowest form of television countdowns.
Mm-hmm.
But it was cool. Like, and as a kid, it was kind of a way to learn about somewhat recent history, like musical history, where like my parents told me a lot, you know what I mean? Like everything I know about Cheap Trick comes from my dad. But yeah, there's a lot of this other sort of stuff that I didn't get. And that is where I learned about Talking Heads, is they were talking about the specific song, Burning Down the House. And I was like, oh, I remember that from a couple years ago when I was a little kid and I found the CD. So I like went and put the CD on and I was like, this is weird. Like, again, I was... I'm 10 at the oldest, maybe even younger at the time. Like, I didn't even have my own CD player yet. They were available. We didn't own them for whatever reason. But yeah, like I remember having to go to my dad's room and get a CD player so I could have to listen to it without it just like being on the whole stereo system and being like, no, this is pretty cool. And then, in spite of the early exposure, never listened to them again until, like, I don't know, fairly later, like I was a teenager, and I heard the song Psycho Killer, and I was like, this is sick. Looked in, and I was like, oh, Talking Heads, I know who that is. And, yeah, I'm mostly just familiar with Stop Making Sense, which I'm sure we will get into at length later. But yeah, it sounds like you guys both know a lot more about this band than I do. But I've got a little bit of exposure. But I thought it was funny that you just kind of like remember them always being there, whereas I can pinpoint very specifically like this tower of CDs, and I can remember the couch I was sitting on when I was watching this VH1 show. So there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's a little more specific than mine. I mean, for me, I was just kind of always like aware of them, but I never really got into them very much. Like I obviously like the big songs like Psycho Killer, Once in a Lifetime, that kind of stuff. Like that was always like, you know, in the periphery of my like music taste. But I didn't really like dive into them until like we as a group, like as the club, we took a trip out to I think it was Howell for when they re-released Stop Making Sense.
Just a bit of context for the people listening at home. Last summer, the movie, which we will talk about, of the performance of Stop Making Sense, went for a re-release. It hadn't seen theaters since the 80s. And yeah, we all went to see it as a club, and it was really cool.
It was a spiritual experience, is what they say.
Okay,
I don't know about that, but it was getting there.
You might be overselling it a little bit, but point is, join the club and come to future events. We're gonna try to go into some stuff. I've got something not lined up, but I sent an email at the start of this summer, and they sent an email back, and I'm disorganized, so I haven't sent them the then reply email, but I'm working on it. So there's a little teaser, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
We're setting things up for the future. If you want to see it pay off, please come to the clubs.
Please.
Anyway, let's quit goofing off. Tell me about the Talking Heads.
All right. So in, I believe it was 1974 at the Rhode Island School of Design, it was Chris France, David Byrne, and Tina Weymouth. They formed Talking Heads.
Yeah.
They didn't do much until they went to New York City and joined the actual CBGB punk scene, and they met Jerry Harrison, who was the guitarist for the Modern Lovers, in 1975, and that was when like the real final lineup of the band was solidified. And
so they're definitely part of like that first like generation of like big like punk acts from New York, I know a lot of other names like that, like Ramones and Television also got their start.
Patti
Smith too. Yeah, Patti Smith. All in the CBGB, just New York underground scene. And it was there that they were noticed by, I think it was Sire Records, and they signed them for what became their first album, which came out in 1977, and they called it Talking Heads 77.
Oh boy.
Because they're very creative naming. And this is again like it's a very strong start for them, I think. Compared to like their later stuff, it's really like stripped back almost. Like it's just like the four of them. Punk rock, absolutely. But not quite like it's punk rock, but it's got like a different sensibility to it. Like there's really not any like anger behind the songs like a lot of punk artists, like, you know, they lean heavy into that.
It's not the Misfits.
Which
would have been going on at the same time.
Yeah. And I think something about this album is also there's kind of almost like a Latin or like Caribbean vibe for some of the songs. Like the opening song, it's called Uh-Oh, Love Has Come to Town.
Great track.
Oh yeah, there's like a steel drum part, and it's so catchy. I love it. The whole album is really like it's got like it's really the start of the whole nervous. It's got like a really nervous energy to it, like
neurotic,
yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of like obviously with time we would associate that sound with like post punk.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sort of like this isn't just feelings anymore. It's a different sort of emotion.
Exactly.
And it's not necessarily pleasant, but it has a feel and a vibe.
Absolutely.
I mean, post-punk is what I'm describing, but they kind of got there.
Yeah, they were one of the first artists in that kind of scene.
They developed into it.
Yes, they did. Yeah. And then of course, this album is probably most famous for their first, major hit, and probably one of the songs that, like, if you say Talking Heads, it's probably the first one people think of, which is of course Psycho Killer, which is incredible song, obviously incredible song.
Yeah.
Just the bass line to that, I feel like it's burned into my memory.
But not hard to play.
No, absolutely.
So
it's very simple.
Perfect for a band, garage band starting out.
This whole album's kind of really like that. It's simple parts, but they're played with like, so much energy that you really sells it. Absolutely, yeah, the punk rock kind of thing.
I was listening to an interview It was Mark Maron and David Byrne, and David talked about his intentions with Talking Heads was, we are going to like keep it simple. We are going to play like very bare bones songs, but all of the parts will like weave in and out of each other, and it will just be good music. And one of the first songs they wrote was Psycho Killer as proof of concept. Like David Byrne wrote Psycho Killer as a way to go like, okay, can I write a song? And if so, will it be good? And it's arguably still their biggest hit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then also I want to shout out their bassist, Tina Weymouth. She carries, I want to say she carries this album, but she is definitely like the most distinctive part that, you can really feel like the bass lines to it. It's almost got like a dance feel to it. It's kind of like a little funk influences.
Her rhythm. So
Yeah.
I don't know this album well at all. I think I've made it clear that I don't know a ton about the Talking Heads, but I know like the later stuff, and especially her stuff with Tom Tom Club. Her rhythm is impeccable.
Right.
And driving in a way that like the bass doesn't have to be, but when it is, it sounds so
absolutely
cool. It sounds so cool. And that's like, we have the discussion about like lead guitar, rhythm guitar a lot, like where does bass fall? Is it harmony? Is it the rhythm section? She does a good job of maintaining the like counter harmony kind of sound, but boy is the rhythm cool. Boy is it's like a groove.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of those songs are a groove, like, and I mean, Psycho Killer is the exact poster child for that. And like, you could lift that bass part, drop it into a disco song, and you'd be like, "This is a groove."
No, I think they said
it would be a really simple groove, but it's a groove.
They're definitely influenced a lot. Maybe not on this album as much, but as we go on, they're definitely taking a little bit from disco with like the drum parts and the bass parts. I think it was
Dance music is gonna be very important to their later records.
Speaking of their follow up to that, which is More Songs About Buildings and Food. Interesting title. This is an album that I think doesn't really get talked about as much in like the grand scheme of their discography, but it is very important in their development because this is where they first meet someone who's going to be very important later on, who is Brian Eno.
The one and only.
He'll keep popping up on a lot of these deep dives, I think.
We will do a Brian Eno deep dive.
Absolutely, we have to. It's going to happen. We'll talk about this album again later then. And this is More Songs is really like a development on the sound of the first album. It's got a lot of the same like just like the simple like rhythms and the driving punk energy, but there's like a layer of like polish on it, and like it's a lot more like professionally done. Obviously with Brian Eno there, he's bringing in a ton of
one of the greatest music producers
absolutely
of all time.
It's
gonna sound better.
No, and it's really, you can start hearing like a little bit of like an advancement here, but like there's a lot of more synthesizer parts that are doing a lot more like interesting stuff in the background, but it's not quite like the focus yet, like it'll be at later points. One song I know off this album that I think exemplifies it would be the opening track, which is probably one of my favorite songs by them, which is "Thank You for Sending Me an Angel." It's a strange song because it's not like, it's got like a galloping like the drum beat at the beginning, and it's like probably, I don't want to say it's their best album opener because they have a lot of, every single album opens really well, but it's definitely up there. And another thing about this album is that it's also, there starts to be like a little bit of like a country influence somehow, which it's not something you really think about with like new wave stuff like country rock, but it starts sneaking in a little bit here, and it doesn't really play a big part in their sound after this album for quite a while, but it's definitely like an undertone, and I think that's adds an interesting layer to the sound.
Can you give me a specific example, because I have no idea.
There's a song called "The Big Country," which is the album closer, is pretty much like a new wave country song, and I love it. It's fantastic.
It's like,
I'll check it out.
It's like it's a nice little satirization of like uppity city people, talking about like, these people out in the country are living these like wonderful fulfilled lives. I'd rather die than move out there and live like a wonderful peaceful life with my family and friends.
Yeah.
It's a great record. Like you were saying, it really is a continuation of 77 with a bit more sheen and polish on it. You can hear the instruments individually a little bit better because, Brian Eno knows how to EQ things correctly.
It's been mixed.
Oh yeah. It's been mixed in a way that I say complements
there's
their sound a lot and will continue to do so.
Absolutely.
There's so many of those early punk groups where like their first couple albums are almost unlisten toable because it's like it was either recorded live,
Right.
or like it was recorded in a day and they were just like chugging it out as quick as they could, didn't have a producer, you know what I mean? Like I mentioned the Misfits earlier. Some of their early stuff sounds terrible. And by the end of like, once you get to like Static Age recording and stuff, it's because they practiced so much. They knew how to get that sound, but it's like, well, you guys probably could have gotten that sound just with like a better producer. Like, I hate to say it, but like so much, you know, you can rehearse and you can write a song, you can really get the sound you want, but like a good producer will just get you miles ahead.
Right.
And it's so cool that they managed to connect with just such a huge legend relatively early on.
Oh yeah, no, I think
know.
definitely he heard the first album and he was very interested in where they were going, so he came to check them out. Like that's a lot of those early like punk bands. It's really how they like a lot of they got started. It's really just people coming into the shows, you know, hearing what they have and then, you know, thinking they have potential and getting going with it. That's how they got their start anyway. Yeah, it's very good. And that Brian Eno, while he's kind of not quite super present on the first one, he definitely shows up for this one here, which is their third album, Fear of Music. And this is really where he starts making his impact known.
Yeah, his influence can be absolutely felt on More Songs About Buildings and Food, but on Fear of Music and Remain in Light, you could argue that he was like an unofficial member of the band because of how influential and how massive his influence is on the records. Like the production on More Songs and 77 sounds nothing like the opener of Fear of Music, E Zimbra.
Oh yes.
Which is a straight up like Afrobeat track. And
So-
they had never done anything like that up until that point.
So can I ask, is it just changing the sound or is it also changing the songwriting itself?
The songwriting itself, I think, changes.
It gets
He introduced David Byrne to a lot of like music from around the world, specifically Fela Kuti, who will come back when we talk about Remain in Light, because he's going to be a big deal. He introduced David Byrne to like a lot of Afrobeat, cumbia, salsa, which David Byrne would go on to make a salsa record, I think, in the early 90s.
He does a lot of that in the 90s.
The songs themselves change because of Brian Eno introducing the band members to all sorts of different music, and they start incorporating it, you know, like any good artist does, into their music. And I think that's where a lot of their like art school tendencies come into play. They don't care about like, we have to make this sound, you know, like everyone else. They have a specific idea, and they will pull from wherever they need to in order to make the song that they need to make. They're not trying to fit into any mold. They're doing their own thing.
Well, and that's so many bands. That's exactly what makes them great is when they say, okay, we're not just going to do what's commercially successful. We're going to experiment. It's going to be art. You know what I mean? Music is obviously an art form. I mean, we talk about the music that is being sold. You know what I mean? If you literally didn't care about selling music, you'd be a street musician. Fine career to have. But when an artist like really says, no, I'm going for the art and I'm going for the experiment, it's so cool. And you can hear it a lot of the time. There's a comfort where like some of the artists, especially now with like modern pop artists, where you're like, I can almost hear you singing this and that you're not feeling it, that this isn't you. And it's weird, you know, it's uncomfortable, and that's, people don't like that music. And when these artists really say like, no, we're doing this for the music, we are not just trying to be successful, it shows, and it's very cool. And you know, part of probably why they were such a great band is that they had this art focus.
Absolutely.
I had no idea that they were art students at some point.
Oh yeah.
It definitely bleeds through with their, you know, their whole approach to the like songwriting. It's
and their
like you
stage
said,
presence.
stage presence. They did a lot of I know you saw Stop Making Sense, but they were definitely
performative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they put their whole, they put themselves into the art when they were on the
Which
stage.
There are
because-
plenty of those early punk bands that, were performative, but there were plenty that weren't. It
Mhm.
was four guys standing on a stage playing their instruments without moving. And it's
Right.
like, guys, this is punk rock. Like, you
Yeah.
gotta move, man. Like, this genre invented the pogo dance
Yeah.
because it was like, no, we just want to move all the time even more. But we can't dance, so we're just going to jump,
Yeah.
I think I really do think that Fear of Music is where the dance music starts to
Yeah.
come to fruition. Like the opener E Zimbra, very danceable.
Absolutely.
Straight up dance track. Another song, Highlight, which is on Stop Making Sense. One of my favorite Talking Heads songs, which is Life During Wartime.
Oh God. Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's the closer to the first act of Stop Making Sense when everybody finally comes on stage.
Mhm.
You can really hear he wanted to move. He wanted to
Absolutely.
make bops.
That is like the live version of that is probably like one of the most energetic things like I think I've listened to ever. It's just watching that happen. Like he's running around the stage. We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about Stop Making Sense later, but it really is the kind of stuff that like you can't just like sit down and listen to it. It makes you like want to get up and dance along. It's great, and that I think that is definitely emphasized here on what is probably their best album, definitely their most like influential album, which is Remain in Light, which is really where they go all in on like the African Afrobeat influences and like the synth soundscapes and all that.
So after Fear of Music, the band sort of got frustrated, so they took a minor break and started working on other projects. Notably, David Byrne and Brian Eno worked on this project called My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, which is very weird.
Yeah.
Like even for Talking Heads, it's incredibly odd.
But is it good?
I think so.
It's like a sound collage kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'll look.
You got to immerse yourself into it. It's not like you're gonna like spin a track like in the car. It's very much a sit down experience.
Set aside an afternoon.
Yeah. And I think during the session was where Brian Eno fully showed like David Byrne like, hey, this is Fela Kuti. He invented this genre called Afrobeat. Check it out. And he did. He did. And he was enraptured by it. The rhythms, how complex it was, how important the details of the production were. I believe the record Aphrodisiac by Fela Kuti was the main source of like inspiration behind Remain in Light. It's very repetitive, very texture focused. It's hard for me to talk about Fela Kuti if you haven't heard Fela Kuti because they're like 10-minute songs.
Do we need to make a Splinter episode? Like, okay, this is the Talking Heads deep dive. This will be the Fela Kuti deep dive. Like right after just an addendum episode.
Yeah. If we're ready to go through
we can't.
70 albums, then sure.
Yeah.
No, we definitely don't have that time.
Yeah. But yeah. So in the songwriting approach of Remain in Light, David Byrne emphasized sampling, like repetitive grooves, horns, very disparate sounds. He wanted to pull from everywhere to make I'm just going to call it a very human experience.
Yeah.
He wanted it to be like, I don't know, you just want to move your body to it. It appeals to the senses in a very visceral way.
It's almost fundamental
Mhm.
in the way it affects your brain.
Absolutely. I was gonna say, and then it's really more of the influences also on this. Beyond just like the Afrobeat, there's almost, I don't want to say like it's like hip hop, but like there's definitely a little bit of that like the early hip hop sound, like in the vocal delivery for some of the songs. I know in Cross-Eyed and Painless, he's rapping at one point, which is interesting.
Yeah, he's referencing the breaks.
Yeah,
which is one of the first like early hip hop songs. And he's like, facts are simple and facts are straight.
Yeah,
just doing a very early like hip hop flow over this jittery Afrobeat instrumental.
This is incredible.
It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else to say about Remain in Light other than you should listen to it.
Yes,
It's one of those records. It's hard to describe because one, I'm so familiar with it that it's hard for me to like explain it to someone who isn't, because it just feels so fundamental at this point
Right.
in like my music journey, I guess. And two, it's Remain in Light.
Oh yeah, it's Remain in
And
Light. What more can you say?
Very few records sound like it. That's
Absolutely,
Just-
it's up there.
Check it out.
Please check it out.
please.
Please, if there's any one thing you take away from this podcast, it's just go listen to Remain in Light. It's essential. It's
Listen
just
to Remain in
essential.
Light. One of the 7 things that we're going to give you from this podcast.
Yes, one thing. This is the big one thing.
This
I
is
think
the big one thing.
The big
this
one
time,
thing.
This time
Yeah.
it's for real. Go
So,
listen to
yeah.
Remain in Light.
So moving on from that, in between Remain in Light and their next album, they kind of split up for like 2 years and pursued their solo projects. David Byrne went off with Brian Eno, and they made like My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. They released a live album, which this is really good live album. It's just it kind of chronicles their whole like evolution from like their really early days performing as just like a 4-piece all the way up to like their Remain in Light tour, which they had like a bunch of like synthesizer players. They had an additional guitarist. They had a bunch of backing vocalists. It's interesting because if you listen to that album, you can just hear them like the sound like expand and expand with time. It's great.
And wasn't the setting for that one super punk rock? I'm not very familiar with it, but weren't they like basically just in somebody's living room?
Oh yeah, no. The couple songs of this are recorded like I think it was at like a college radio station
Nice.
in Massachusetts. So they got their start there. And then Tom Tom Club was another thing. That was where they, I think it was Chris France and Tina Weymouth, who they're married, by the way. I don't know if we've said that yet. The drummer, Chris France.
The rhythm section,
Yes.
which is part of why they're so tight, is they are married. They have a lot of chemistry with one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tom Tom Club. We could do a whole episode on Tom Tom Club. I don't know. We could talk a little bit about it, but they're very good on their own as well.
They are good. I probably know as many Tum Tum Club songs as Talking Head songs.
Yeah.
I'm
Genius of
embarrassed-
Love,
I'm
that's the
embarrassed to
one.
admit.
That's
And
the
I
big
don't know
one.
a lot of either, but
That's fair. They're very good. But
This was
Yeah.
their like commercial breakthrough period, by
Yes.
the way, with Once in a Lifetime and like that video for Once in a Lifetime going on MTV. Everyone going, "What
how did
is
I get
this?"
here?
And then of course, Genius of Love connected to Talking Heads. Everyone was like, "Oh, this Tom Tom Club song is great. What is this?" And then it's just like, "Oh, it's Talking Heads."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when they blew up
Yeah.
officially.
And then they followed that up with this is probably like the start of their like really commercial period. It's just Speaking in Tongues, which I love this album cover, by the way. This was designed by David Byrne himself.
Mhm.
I don't know if
it's
you
pretty
can see all that, but it's very nice. And that was they got rid of Brian Eno because I believe there was like a lot of creative issues between him and especially Chris and Tina, because he was really demanding about the bass parts. And I know at some points he tried to re-record some of them behind her back, and she was not very happy about that.
Oh no!
But that's Brian Eno, perfectionist. He wants the best, but that led to them breaking up. And this that album, it kind of, I don't want to say it suffers from like the lack of having Eno there to balance out David Byrne and everybody, but it's not quite as experimental. But at the same time, it is it's very accessible. It's probably their most accessible album.
It
While
has
also
their biggest hits on
biggest
it
hits.
consistently.
Burning Down the House, and then This Must Be the Place, Naive Melody, which might be my favorite Talking Heads song. Maybe I don't want to say it's my
So-
favorite ever, but it's up there.
So I will in terms of mainstreamness.
Yeah.
This ties in exactly to my experience, where I learned about Burning Down the House from the garbage VH1 TV show and went and checked it out. And boy, Burning Down the House is a song of the 80s. Like,
Absolutely.
no doubt about it. But yeah, but it's a good way to connect with the band, and it isn't just, it's not like an 80s one-hit wonder. It's not that sound. It is way more complex than that. And that's, I think, part of what turned me on to them, when I was younger, is that song specifically, because through the watching of the show, I was sitting pulling out, one-hit wonders and a very 80s sound, and this was something like it, but complex and exciting in a different way. And I would also say Naive Melody, I don't know why I don't know it by its actual proper name. This must be the place.
This must be the place.
I don't, in my head, just the parentheses seem so much more important in that case. But that song is like we talked about earlier how they're almost post-punk, and this song very much not
No.
post-punk, but you can still feel that sort of like neurotic feel while it's still like so relaxed.
Yeah.
And it's still just such a chill jam. And with some of that like world influence, obviously like the rhythm in that song is very not traditional rock and roll sounding. And yeah, it's awesome. And there's a reason it made it to the mainstream. It was some good stuff.
Well deserved. And then the tour for that album led us to what I would consider probably maybe my favorite thing they ever did, which is Stop Making Sense, which is a concert film and a soundtrack that is probably. You want to look at that? Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just
beautiful
want to
art.
look at the cover here.
Yeah, that is
because
the A24
this is-
re-release of it.
Oh, okay. So it is different. Because I was
Yeah.
saying, this is not the album cover
No,
that I saw
that's
on my
new.
dad's
That's
CD
different.
collection.
Yeah,
this probably would have just scared me. Like,
Oh
this
yeah,
is-
that's
this
so
is some next
terrifying.
level
Look at the
stuff.
back. Yeah.
Oh, I mean that's sick.
Can you hold
That's
that up for
sick,
the
dude.
camera? Actually, I want
Yeah,
to.
where am I? So this is the front.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
This is the back.
Terrifying.
Very
I don't know why there's
cool,
so many
very cool.
skeletons on it, but
Yeah,
that's
it's
awesome.
Just,
it's awesome.
A scary vibe, man.
Yeah. This performance is probably their like peak as a performing act. There's just I know we've said this a million times. We've talked about Stop Making Sense on a couple of other episodes, but it's just the energy from it is just infectious.
Go watch it.
Absolutely. Just watch. It's on. I think it's on HBO Max or
Is
something.
it?
But
Okay,
yeah.
because I know for a while there was a bootleg version on YouTube.
Yeah.
I think
I'm
it
not.
might be
I'm
still
not
up.
suggesting people pirate media, but I think there might be a bootleg version on YouTube that you can watch for free. Go for it.
Anyway, it's
But-
very good.
It is very good, and it's just it's wild how exciting of a movie it is.
Oh, yeah.
like there's a million concert movies.
Absolutely.
Like one of my favorites is the one I can't remember what it's called, but Led Zeppelin. I think they're at Madison Square Garden. Cool, but that's a concert, and that is
Yeah.
only a concert. There is nothing going into that beyond it being a concert and a 20-minute version of Dazed and Confused. But that's not it's nothing extra in like a performance. Whereas like we went to see that movie and I was like, I knew about it sort of. Again, that was
Yeah.
kind of my exposure to them. But yeah, that just like the energy building from the start right until like
Oh,
you
yeah.
talked about it earlier, until that middle point where once everybody's out there, you're just like you're almost like on edge. You
Yeah,
want
no, it's
there
building
to be
up.
more energy,
Yeah.
but like it's building up and building up while still like making you want it to be a bit more.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just it's a weird sort of like nervous energy.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
finally by that midpoint they just hit and you're
Yeah,
just like,
life during wartime, it just all just
Damn.
explodes. It's crazy.
Right. And
He's
and-
literally running circles around
Yeah.
on the stage.
All of the
Oh.
musicians are like jogging in place.
Oh, absolutely.
While playing their
well, and then
instruments.
I mean, like Tina Weymouth basically marks time.
Oh,
While
yeah,
playing the
she's
bass.
just
Like, I
running
don't
the
know if
whole
she-
time.
I don't know if she was in a marching band at some point or what, but like always moving her feet.
I don't know how she does it. Like, I've tried
yeah.
to like recreate it on my own to be like, hey, can I do the life during wartime
gotta
bass line
train.
while jogging? No, I can't.
She's built differently. I
She's
guess.
built
Well,
different.
and like, and especially on bass too. Like she plays with her fingers. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
She just doesn't use a pick. Like, and that's like once you get into that position and you start moving your hips and you start moving your like, you can get your wrist up and down with a pick. All right. Like to be precise, hard, but like especially once you're like being really precise with where your fingers are going, like it's hard to dance with a bass guitar. Like it's very impressive.
Yeah.
And just shows that like she practices. She
Absolutely.
practices a lot, and she probably dances while she practices, which is cool. Like I love that. You hear about like the artists that'll be like in the studio doing the dances. You know what I mean? I think like Whitney Houston was a famous one that would in the studio be dancing the entire time. Nobody can see her except the like producer, But if it's part of the feel of the song to you, it's going to translate into the recording probably, which is cool.
Yeah. And I also want to say about Stop Making Sense. I don't want to say that it like makes speaking in tongues obsolete, but every song on Stop Making Sense, the live version is just it. I don't want to say like it blows out the other ones out of the water, like the studio versions, just
the Brian
because
Eno production is sorely missed, I think.
Yeah, but it just in the live setting, those songs they're really come across really well. Like This Must Be the Place. I think David Byrne, he starts dancing with a lamp during that. And that is and it's like the theatricality, the art student, them being art students. I think it adds to like Stop Making Sense because you can.
Absolutely.
It's just like the theatrical sets to it. That's why it makes it just like so engaging to watch it, like adding the visual aid to it.
And I'd like to mention real fast it's very dancey. This performance that we're talking about, Stop Making Sense. It's very dancey. It's very active, but it still feels just a little bit punk rock. There's still just a little bit of subversive nature to it. The big suit looks ridiculous, but it isn't silly. It's kind of not making a point, but it's kind of being out there for the sake of that, not to be silly.
Absolutely.
And some of the other things, like the running around, some of the stuff. I'm sorry, I don't know the guy's name, but the like second percussionist that they have. Not the drummer.
I'm forgetting his name.
No,
a lot of his vibe and stuff. It could easily just be like, okay, this is just more dancey stuff, whatever. And that's kind of what the sound is in the recordings of the music. But like the way they move, the way they interact, and the way they fit into the ensemble, it isn't just fluff. There's still a little bit of a like we're doing things differently, you know what I mean? It's almost a little subversive, you know what I mean? They're intentionally going, we're gonna do this a little bit differently. It's gonna be really cool.
Absolutely.
And it's awesome. Go watch it.
Go watch Stop Making Sense. If there's one thing that you take from this podcast,
no, see, because we can say like this is the one thing you have to listen to, and this is the one thing you have to watch.
Okay, see, yeah, technical. We got technical about it. That counts. Yeah. But yeah, Stop Making Sense. It ended up being their final actual tour together. Everything after this, they just recorded in studio. I want to touch on the later stuff a little bit briefly because I don't want to say that like it's bad, but just like some of the magic it's just kind of gone because they kind of go like all the way into like straightforward like pop rock kind of stuff for their next album, which Little Creatures. That's fine.
It's okay.
It's got Road to Nowhere. Road to Nowhere is great. It's like it's like a little bit of that like it's almost like the country stuff coming back. And then And She Was, which is the first track, which I love. And She Was.
Everybody knows And She Was.
That is a frightening music video.
I'm curious, do you guys know more about this? Do you feel like they sold out? Or did they just change style?
I don't think they sold out. I think they stopped really wanting to be a band, but they already achieved success. So it's like, okay, let's just like keep doing the thing. We're the band. It's
just like when you go into your job and you're like, I guess I'm doing the 9 to 5 today, you know.
David Byrne didn't want to be in Talking Heads like post 1985.
Yeah, he was really like, again, also at the same time he was like really trying to take control of it. And he was getting frustrated because the others didn't really want to go along with a lot of stuff he was doing. The follow-up to that is kind of a little bit of exemplifying it, which is the album True Stories, which came with like it was a movie. I haven't seen
film
the film
and album.
Yeah, and it's like I don't know very much about the film, but I know it's just like David Byrne's baby. It's like it's like a satire of like rural life. It's just him like it's not like mean-spirited as much as it's just like an observation he makes. It's definitely their most like straight up just regular pop rock country-ish album. It's got some good songs,
but but even then, like the best songs there won't hold a candle to anything on like 77.
No,
or God forbid Remain in Light.
No, that they don't even touch that. And and then their final album, which I think they get a little bit of it back on their final album. They really lean heavily all the way into like the world music kind of stuff, but not like in the Remain in Light way. They get like a full orchestra of like world musicians, like a whole horn section, like strings, a ton of percussion. It doesn't quite. It was just really. I think it was the whole album was like mostly like improvisational by the artists themselves, and like I don't know. It's just it doesn't come across quite as well as their other more improvisational stuff does. Again, like it's just there's no Eno there to regulate him.
Mm-hmm.
The song Nothing But Flowers though, that's really good. That's the best song off that album. I think that's one of their better ones actually.
Then after that, if I recall correctly, David Byrne just said, "No, I'm done."
And then he said it in an interview with the magazine, and the rest of the band found out by reading the magazine that the Talking Heads was over. And they tried to keep it going for a little bit with other lead vocalists, but that didn't go anywhere, and they kind of split their separate ways. David Byrne has had a successful, I don't want to say like, he does what he wants now. All of his albums are really just him experimenting with all sorts of genres, all that kind of thing he wants. His current like stage show, I don't know if it's current anymore, but he wrote like a whole like musical kind of thing.
American Utopia,
which I've seen that live performance. It's very like, captivating. Obviously, David Byrne, he does a good live show. He knows what he wants out of that. And then there's a bunch more Tom Tom Club albums as well. I haven't really gotten into that too much.
So I have actually heard a couple of those.
Ooh.
And I do recommend. Little bit weird, little bit. I don't want to say. I don't want to say cheesy at parts. But just like the Talking Heads, every once in a while you go like, yeah, this was made in the late '80s.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It gets a little bit of that, but very cool stuff. And as you might expect, impeccable rhythm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think Jerry Harrison did a bunch of solo stuff, but I have no idea what he's been up to. But he tours now. He's done like touring Remain in Light live with a bunch of other musicians who were on that record. Adrian Belew, I didn't mention him earlier, but he's on that album. He's a great guitarist.
He's one of my favorite guitarists ever.
He shows up on all sorts of things. He was in King Crimson for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanna go back and isolate Leo's mic for a second. That sigh that he just.
I said
He's
Adrian
so
Belew.
good.
He's so good.
It was like the sigh of a boy lying in his mother's arms. It was that, just like love. You clearly have a thing for that song.
We love
You heard
Adrian
that-
Belew.
When you hear him solo on The Great Curve, how do you have any other reaction?
No, there's no other reaction to that. You just have to sit down and you have to listen. Oh wow.
I think that about covers it.
Yeah, that's the Talking Heads.
about-
Moral of the story: check them out. They're really good.
Yeah.
Listen to the playlist that was
yes,
made that compiles Simon's.
I have made a
favorites.
playlist of the songs that I think, not quite my like favorites, but the songs I think really highlight the journey they went on, like musically,
Mhm.
and like it just like the song, the way that their sound changed and all of that. That'll be included with the link. But I do believe that's about all the time we have for today. Maybe more than the time we had, but that's beside the point. If you're interested in coming into any of our meetings, you can check out our website, which is going to be linked along with the podcast. We meet every 2 weeks, and bi-monthly, not every 2 weeks, bi-monthly.
Not technically the same.
And if you go to our website, you can find out our meeting schedule, our themes for our meetings, and the playlists from every meeting that we have. Everyone's welcome. If you have never seen a vinyl record in your life, if you are been collecting for years and years, if you just want to learn about new music and meet other people who are also interested in that, come on down to the Vinyl Club. It's a very accepting group of people, wonderful group of people. It's a great place to expand your horizons musically. Thanks everybody for tuning in today again, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Love you.
Love you. See ya. See, I did it right this time. I didn't. Okay, I got.